Welcome to our CloudBadging ID badge design and print software training video series. In this video, we will focus on datasets and how they are used in CloudBadging to allow you to customize your software to provide exactly what you need in order to be successful designing and printing badges. So with the datasets, in order to access that, there's a couple different ways that you can reach that from the CloudBadging interface. The first is from the dashboard. You'll see there's a getting started options versus configure your printer, which we discussed in a separate video in this series. The second is getting started configure your database. You can either click on this, or another way to access these datasets is from the settings menu here in the upper right corner and clicking on data configuration. Either way, you'll be taken to the dataset screen. Now here on the dataset screen, you'll see that we've got three datasets currently in this particular CloudBadging system. The first is called default. When you first begin using CloudBadging, you'll see just a single dataset called default. That's what comes with the system. Here I've added two additional datasets, one that I've titled Minnesota Office and another that I've titled Florida Office. Why did I do that? Well, a lot of our customers will be served just fine with just a single data set. Sometimes, though, you might need to add more than one. Oftentimes, the reasons for having more than one data set come down to security, where oftentimes you'll have more than one location or business unit, and what you need or have is a desire to restrict access to those different pieces of information for each of those locations or business units. Here what we're simulating is that I have two offices, one in Minnesota and one in Florida. The idea here is that my security requirements are such that I want my employees in my Minnesota office, when they log into CloudBadging, to only be able to see and do things with information that is specific to my Minnesota office. Likewise, in my Florida office, I want my Florida employees to, when they log into CloudBadging, only see the information that pertains to the Florida office. Now, another reason that you might want to have more than one data set aside from just a security requirement like that is simply to make the data a little bit easier to sort and keep separate from each other. So maybe you don't have a security need to have your Minnesota people only see the Minnesota data and your Florida people only see the Florida data. Maybe you just want it for convenience sake. So one way that you could do that would be to create multiple data sets where you can create data for each of those different offices. Now, there are some other reasons that you might not want to do that, simply because when you have more than one data set, it does start to add in some complexity as far as assigning user permissions and making sure that the people that you do want to access that information actually have the ability to do so. In which case, if really all you're looking for is a way to more easily sort or separate the data that you're storing in CloudBadging, what you might want to do is to have just a single data set, and then within that data set, when you are defining the specific data elements that you are capturing, typically for use printing a badge, well, what you might also want to do is just add in a piece of information that will allow you to more easily search and sort through that data set. And let me show you what I'm talking about when I say that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to click on my default data set, and that'll take me into the actual data set. And you'll see that on this screen, here on the left, I've got the ability to add in some new fields of information. I can add in a text data element, a number or numeric data element, a date, or an image. Over here on the right, you'll see that we'll start you off with some plausible data elements that you may in fact want to capture for use printing a badge. Most folks at the end of the day when they're printing these badges out are printing out identification, and so you want things like the person's name, maybe a job title or description, some sort of level in the organization, a photo quite frequently, because these are used as photo ID as well. Well, that's what all these different pieces of information or data elements here on the right are. These are the different things that when we create a record in preparation for printing a badge in CloudBadging, these are the different pieces of information that we're going to need to input in order to then print the badge. Now, there's no reason that you need to keep any or all of these particular data elements. For example, if I was in fact interested in capturing first and last name information but not interested in capturing a level, well, what I could do there is just delete that field from my data set. You'll see here to the right on each one of these line items, there are three icons. You'll see a triangle with an exclamation point, a key, and a trash can. Now, the trash can is probably the simplest one to talk about. That's just going to allow you to remove that from the data set. You'll see that when you click that trash can icon, it removes it from the data set. And then we have the opportunity to save our changes. Now, I'm not going to save those changes because I don't actually want to modify this system. However, in the real world, what I would in fact want to do is to click Save Data Changes. Next, let's talk about the triangle with the exclamation point. What this does is when a user is creating a record in preparation for printing a badge, if you want to force that user to enter something in that field before they're allowed to save the record, then what you want to do is click on this triangle with the exclamation point, and that'll highlight it into this kind of a green color. Might be a little hard to see on the interface, but when you do click that triangle, it will either highlight it and turn it green, meaning you are in fact making it a required field, or it will gray out, meaning it's not a required field, and when somebody's creating a record, they can just skip it. Now, the last icon here is the key icon. And what this is the way that data sets work. Now, what does that really mean, data set? Well, it's the same idea as a database or a means of capturing information in a computerized system that you're then going to do something with. In this case, print ID badges. Well, the way that data sets or databases work is you have to have one of those data elements that you're capturing in a record. It has to be defined as something called a primary key. And we'll start you off with the ID number field as your primary key in the data set. Now, you can change this. If you wanted to, you could add in a new element, a new data element, and make that your primary key and then remove the existing primary key. That's the kind of thing, though, that you want to make sure that you really want to do, and you do that before you start creating any records. Because if you start creating records and change your primary key, you're going to lose record information. So make sure that you plan that out appropriately from the get-go. Now, the rest of the information on this screen, let's just say I needed to add in some more information. I've got a first name, a last name, a title, a photo, some dates here. Well, maybe I just need to capture something else. Well, all you would do is over here on the left, click on the appropriate type of information that you're capturing. Most often, you're going to just add in a text data field. Click on text, and then you'll see that a new line item will be put at the top of the list. And what you'll do is give it a label or a name of some sort. What should you put in for the label or the name? Well, two real pieces of advice. The first, keep it short and keep it clear. And what I mean by that is a short is just simply a reference to the number of characters you're using. Try not to have a label that's extremely lengthy. That'll make adding it onto the template later a little bit difficult. Clear, what do I mean by that? Well, use the vernacular, the verbiage that makes sense to you and the people who are going to be creating the records when they're creating badges. It really doesn't matter what it says as long as it makes sense to you and your people. Now, the last thing that I would do prior to adding in a new data element and clicking Save Data Changes is if I want to, I can click and drag this and move it down in the list. Well, why would I do that? Well, the way that these data elements are displayed from top to bottom corresponds with on the records screen, which you can find out more information on records in a separate video in this series. That information will be displayed left to right in your standard spreadsheet type of a view, or table view, I should say. So if you wanted the label or name field to be the leftmost data point on the record screen, well, you would just have it at the top. If you'd want it to be the rightmost data point, have it at the bottom, or anywhere in between that makes sense to you. All that really is, folks, is just a personal preference for when you're actually viewing the records on the record screen. It doesn't really make any terribly practical or functional difference other than personal preference. Now, the last thing to talk about here with the data sets is how do I add permission for another user to see this data? Again, the whole idea could very well be that you want to restrict access for security reasons, or again, simply through convenience. Well, you'll see down here under the settings here, we've got a name. If I wanted to, I could rename this from default to Minnesota office or Florida office, or again, whatever makes sense to you. The description field is where you can enter in information that when people are looking at the data sets that exist in the system, if you want to help them, if the name itself isn't necessarily a good enough cue to tell them what it is, you could put in more information in the description field. Under the permissions, we see that this user, Jeremy Martin, has access to this data set. Here, there's an Add Access for User drop down, and I don't have any other users in this system to show you, but if I was clicking on this, and actually I am clicking, but again, there's no other users to show, what you would see display in that drop down would be all the other users in the cloud badging system, and it would just be a matter of clicking on that username, and then you'll see that name appear above here in the permissions area. Again, anytime you make a change, whether it's adding a data element, moving them around, deleting data elements, changing any of the settings information, you'll want to click Save Data Changes in order to do exactly that. Now, one last thing to talk about with the information that you'll see here, dates. The date data element is a good way to capture date information. When you're actually inputting the information on the record screen, you'll see a little calendar that will pop up, and you can click on an arrow to go forward a month or two, or however many months you need to. You can click on individual days on that calendar. It's nice. It's a good way to capture calendar information. An issue that some folks run into, though, is that the format of the date when it prints in this system when you use a date data element is not the standard month, day, year format that we're used to here in the United States. It's instead the international standard of year, month, day. That can be a little confusing for folks. So if what you need is, in order to capture dates or display dates on your badges, if you want that to be in your standard month, day, year format, what you'll have to do is to delete the existing date data elements. And again, you can see what type of each data element is by what's in this little field here. You see there's the TT here that matches with the text. You see there's that image icon that matches with the image data element, and so on. Same thing for the dates. You'll see a little calendar there. Well, if you do run into this problem, what you'll need to do is to remove the date data elements and then just add in a text field. And then what you'll do is, again, give it a label. So maybe I'll call this date of issue. And I would just move it around in my list, getting it wherever I want it to be oriented on the screen. And then again, you would click Save Data Changes. Now this time, the difference when a user is creating a record is, of course, the downside is that they won't have a calendar to click through. So we'll just literally type in text, a number, a forward slash, or more numbers, another forward slash in your year, or if you capture dates using a dash or a period or whatever character you denote to separate the month, day, and the year. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching our video on datasets. You can view more cloud badging training videos from our CloudBadging ID badge design and print software training video series to learn how to maximize your use of this ID card printing software. Thank you.